Heat shimmer rising from Florida asphalt. August in Windermere, 20 miles southwest of Orlando. The air thick enough to drink. A gated community where lawns are emerald performances and driveways hold vehicles that cost more than houses elsewhere. At 6,121 Kirkstone Lane, behind gates and security checkpoints, stands a structure that refuses the word house. 90,000 square feet under one roof. 14 bedrooms, 30 bathrooms, 11 kitchens, a 35-car garage, a 2-story movie theater with balcony inspired by the Paris Opera House, an ice skating rink, a bowling alley, a baseball diamond, 3 swimming pools, a 20,000-bottle wine cellar, custom bronze doors standing 18 feet tall, mahogany harvested from Brazilian trees before the government banned the trade, 24-karat gold leaf applied by hand to ceiling domes, the largest single-family home in America, modeled on the Palace of Versailles, built over 21 years, still unfinished, beautiful. Yes, but the man who commissioned it never moved in. He died this year. Construction continues without him. The house was supposed to announce permanence. Instead, it documented something else, financial collapse in 2008 that froze construction for years, a daughter's death in 2015 that redefined its meaning, hurricane damage in 2022 costing $10 million in repairs, decades of workers laying marble and gold in a monument to one family's aspiration, a monument that outlasted its architect. Behind the blueprints for ballrooms and the plans for a garage larger than most apartment buildings ran a different story. The invisible machinery of construction, the gap between vision and completion, the cost measured not just in dollars but in time no fortune could buy back. Can you build your way to immortality if the building never stops? And when the founder dies before the dream is finished, who decides what it all meant? If you're drawn to stories where ambition meets consequence and wealth confronts mortality, consider subscribing. These investigations take time. Your support makes them possible. Let's begin. July 2004, Windermere, Florida. David Siegel was 69 years old. He had built the largest privately owned timeshare company in the world, an empire of resorts where Americans bought one-week fantasies on installment plans. Westgate Resorts operated 28 properties across the United States. Revenues approached $1 billion annually. He lived in a 26,000-square-foot house maintained by 19 staff members. He flew on private jets. His wife, Jackie, spent $1 million per year on clothing alone. He had built an empire, selling other people the dream of vacation ownership. Now he wanted to build something permanent. David Allen Siegel was born May 3, 1935 in Chicago. His father, Sid Siegel, owned a grocery store. The family moved to Miami in 1945, bringing the business with them. David grew up stocking shelves, watching his father work 14-hour days, learning that wealth came from volume and persistence, not inheritance. He attended Miami Senior High School, graduated in 1953, enrolled at the University of Miami to study marketing and management. He dropped out before completing his degree. The decision to leave school wasn't failure, it was impatience. The classroom moved too slowly. The real education was happening elsewhere. In Coconut Grove, David opened a television store, not selling new sets, refurbished ones. Broken televisions purchased cheap, repaired, resold at profit. The margins were thin. The work was technical, but it taught him something essential. Value could be created from what others had discarded. A television that didn't work had no value. The same television, repaired, became sellable. The gap between those two states was where money lived. By 1968, Siegel had moved into real estate. Not developing, selling. He worked for other companies, moving land that developers had subdivided into lots. Florida in the late 1960s was expanding rapidly. Swampland was being drained, orange. Groves bulldozed, new communities platted on former wilderness. Siegel learned the mechanics of the business, how land was bought wholesale and sold retail, how financing worked, how sales presentations closed deals. Then he made the calculation that changed everything. He bought 1,280 acres of his own land, not to hold, to subdivide. The profit wasn't in owning large parcels. The profit was in breaking them into smaller pieces and selling those pieces to individuals who couldn't afford 1,280 acres but could afford one. He maximized the return by fragmenting the asset. Volume over individual margin. The grocery store principle applied to dirt. The model worked. He bought an 80-acre orange grove. It generated roughly $100,000 per year in orange sales. Steady income, predictable. But Siegel saw something else. The land itself, subdivided, marketed, financed, could generate far more than fruit ever would. In 1970, working from his garage in Orlando, he founded Central Florida Investments, CFI, a real estate development firm. His family helped. The operation was small. The ambition was not. For the next decade, Siegel bought land, subdivided it, and sold parcels. The business grew steadily. Then, in 1980, he learned about a concept that had been gaining traction in resort communities: timeshares. The idea was elegant in its simplicity. A condominium at a resort might cost $200,000 to own outright. Most buyers couldn't afford that, but 52 buyers could each afford $10,000 to own 1 week per year. The same property, fractionally divided, generated not $200,000 but $520,000. The margins were extraordinary, and because most buyers financed their purchase, the developer could sell the property and provide the loan, collecting interest for years. Siegel recognized the model immediately. It was subdivision applied to time instead of space. In 1982, he opened Westgate Vacation Villas in Kissimmee, Florida, 1 mile from the West Gate of Walt Disney World. 16 units. The first property in what would become Westgate Resorts. Within a decade, Westgate operated across Florida, Las Vegas, Tennessee. The company grew by replicating the formula: build or acquire resort property, divide ownership into weekly intervals, finance the purchases, manage the property. Revenue came from 3 streams: the initial sale, the loan interest, and the ongoing management fees. The model was self-reinforcing. As the portfolio grew, the marketing became more sophisticated. Free weekend stays lured potential buyers to presentations. High-pressure sales teams closed deals. The best salespeople earned 6-figure incomes. The worst didn't last. By the mid-1990s, Westgate was the largest privately held timeshare company in the United States. David Siegel was 47 years old when he opened his first timeshare resort. By then, he had been married twice, divorced twice, and had multiple children from those marriages. He was not starting from privilege. He was starting from persistence, the grocery store work ethic, the understanding that success came from volume, repetition, and refusing to stop. The timeshare business made him wealthy, very wealthy. His personal net worth climbed. By the late 1990s, he was worth tens of millions. By the mid-2000s, hundreds of millions. Some estimates placed him near billionaire status. He was 65 years old when he met Jackie Mallory at a beauty pageant event in Orlando. She was 33. She had been Mrs. Florida in 1993. She was working in the pageant circuit, running competitions, modeling. They married in 2000. The marriage brought a shift. Jackie was visible, social, comfortable in public. David had always been more focused on business than on display. But with Jackie, the lifestyle expanded. They moved into a 26,000 square foot house. They employed 19 people to maintain it. Housekeepers, nannies for their growing family, groundskeepers, drivers. Jackie's clothing budget reached $1 million per year. They flew on private jets. Their children attended private schools. The household operated with the complexity of a small resort. This was not the refurbished television shop in Coconut Grove. This was wealth that had compounded over decades into something entirely different. David Siegel had built an empire by understanding what middle-class Americans wanted and could almost afford. Now he lived in a world those customers would never see. The timeshare business had made it possible. By 2004, Westgate operated 28 properties, more than 10,000 employees. Annual revenues approached $1 billion. The company was privately held, no shareholders, no public reporting requirements. David Siegel controlled it completely. He was 69 years old, wealthy beyond what his father could have imagined, successful by any measure. But success for some people doesn't satisfy. It creates appetite. By 2000, Westgate Resorts operated across Florida, Las Vegas, Tennessee, Utah, and South Carolina, more than 10,000 employees, 28 properties. The company was making money from both ends, selling timeshare weeks and financing the purchases themselves. A customer who bought a week at a Westgate resort in Orlando didn't pay cash. They financed it. Westgate provided the loan. The company collected the sale price, the interest on the loan, and the annual management fees, 3 revenue streams from a single transaction. The model worked because it converted something unaffordable into something almost affordable. A family that couldn't buy a $200,000 vacation condo could finance a $15,000 timeshare week over 10 years, roughly $150 per month. The price point was calibrated carefully, high enough to generate profit, low enough to fit within reach. But beneath the glossy resort, brochures ran a different operation. Sales floors operating with military precision. Teams of closers trained to identify psychological pressure points. Couples brought in for free weekend stays found themselves in 90-minute presentations that stretched to 3 hours. The script was refined through years of testing. Which objections appeared most frequently? Which responses closed deals? The presentations weren't conversations. They were engineered sequences designed to move prospects towards signature. The sales associates worked on commission. Base pay was minimal. The real money came from closing deals. A strong closer could earn $100,000 or more annually. A weak closer lasted weeks before washing out. Turnover was high. The pressure was constant. Daily rallies, monthly rankings, public recognition for top performers, quiet termination for those who missed quotas. Walkaway rates were tracked obsessively. If too many prospects left without buying, presentations were adjusted. Managers analyzed where resistance occurred. New tactics were tested. The operation was data-driven, relentless, and extraordinarily effective. Westgate's closing rates were among the highest in the industry. Critics called the tactics aggressive. Former employees described them as predatory. Consumer protection groups filed complaints. The Federal Trade Commission and state regulators periodically investigated. David Siegel defended the business model publicly. Timeshares, he argued, provided affordable vacations to families who otherwise couldn't afford them. The financing made it possible. The presentations were informative, not coercive. The legal battles came and went. The business continued growing. By 2004, Westgate was generating close to $1 billion in annual revenue. The company owned properties from coast to coast. Construction crews were breaking ground on new resorts. The Las Vegas operation was expanding. Plans for a 52-story high-rise tower adjacent to the Las Vegas Hilton, PH Towers Westgate. The project would cost hundreds of millions to build. It would add thousands of units to Westgate's inventory. David Siegel was betting heavily on Las Vegas. The lifestyle matched the success. David and Jackie lived in their 26,000-square-foot house with staff operating in shifts. Housekeepers maintained the property. Nannies cared for the children. The couple now had multiple young children together, in addition to David's older children from previous marriages. Drivers stood ready. Groundskeepers tended the lawn. The household required coordination, schedules, logistics. Jackie's spending became a subject of media fascination later, but in the mid-2000s it was simply how they lived. $17,000 boots, custom gowns, jewelry, frequent shopping trips that returned with dozens of bags. She was a former beauty queen married to a billionaire, or near billionaire, depending on how assets were calculated. The spending wasn't reckless, it was proportionate to the fortune. The private jets eliminated commercial travel entirely. Scheduling was simpler when you owned the plane. The family flew to resorts, to pageant events, to business meetings without the friction of airports and delays. David Siegel's net worth in 2007 was estimated near $1 billion. The estimates varied because the company was private, but the assets were substantial. 28 resorts, real estate holdings, the growing Las Vegas Tower. Central Florida Investments controlled it all, and David controlled Central Florida Investments. He had started with a television repair shop. Now he ran an empire. Yet for all the properties Westgate owned, David Siegel didn't own a monument. The resorts generated revenue, but they were commercial, functional. Thousands of families cycled through them annually, each owning 1 week, none owning the whole. The 26,000 square foot house was large by any standard, but it was not historic. It would not be remembered. It was a house, not a legacy. David Siegel had built a business by selling fractional ownership, 1 week at a time, incremental purchases, shared space. The model had made him extraordinarily wealthy, but wealth bought in increments. Timeshares, financing, monthly payments felt temporary, transactional. He had sold thousands of families the fantasy of vacation ownership. Now he wanted something that wasn't divided, something permanent, something that would last. The next project wasn't a resort. It was a residence, not for customers, for him. In 2004, David and Jackie Siegel traveled to France. They toured the Palace of Versailles, the 17th century monument to absolute monarchy built by Louis XIV, the Hall of Mirrors, the formal gardens stretching toward manufactured horizons, 700 rooms where nobles once competed for proximity to the Sun King. Jackie walked through the palace with their children. She saw the scale, the ornament, the declaration that one family could command resources sufficient to build something that would outlast dynasties. The palace had survived revolution, war, occupation. Louis XIV had been dead for nearly 300 years. Versailles remained. The idea formed quickly, not to visit a palace, to build one. David Siegel later told reporters the decision emerged from that trip. They could build this, not a replica, an American version, bigger in some ways, different in function, a house, not a seat of government, but comparable in ambition, a structure designed not for a lifetime but for centuries. Back in Florida, they began planning. The first question was where. Windermere, a town southwest of Orlando, offered the combination they needed: proximity to David's business operations, exclusivity, and available land. The Lake Butler Sound gated community provided 10 acres of lakefront property, privacy, security, a location where a 90,000 square foot house wouldn't violate zoning or provoke neighbor complaints. The initial design called for 60,000 square feet, large by any measure, but not unprecedented. As planning progressed, the house grew. Jackie wanted certain features. The children contributed requests: a bowling alley, a movie theater, spaces for entertaining. David wanted the A scale to match the original inspiration. Rooms that could host hundreds. Ceilings high enough to make visitors feel the weight of the architecture. Eventually, the plan settled near 90,000 square feet. 14 bedrooms, 30 bathrooms, 11 kitchens. Not all full kitchens, but spaces equipped to prepare food for different purposes. A commercial kitchen for large events, a family kitchen for daily use, kitchens distributed across wings of the house so staff wouldn't need to traverse the entire structure to serve meals. The garage would accommodate 35 vehicles. Not because the Siegels owned 35 cars, but because the house was designed to host events where guests might arrive in dozens of vehicles simultaneously. Parking needed to be internal, protected, part of the structure rather than external lots. The two-story movie theater included a balcony inspired by the Palais Garnier Opera House in Paris. The bowling alley would be regulation size, 2 lanes. The ice skating rink would be functional, not decorative. The baseball diamond would be full-scale, built on the property grounds. 3 swimming pools, 1 indoor, 2 outdoor. An aquarium for exotic fish. A wine cellar designed to hold 20,000 bottles. The master bedroom alone would span 6,000 square feet. Jackie's closet, a separate wing within the master suite, would exceed 4,000 square feet, larger than the average American home. The closet would include an elevator, allowing Jackie to access clothing storage across multiple levels without leaving the dressing area. The design incorporated Baroque elements from European palace architecture, grand staircases, high ceilings with painted domes, imported marble, gold leaf applied to decorative details. But it also included distinctly American amenities. The basement would hold a video arcade, spaces for yoga studios, a spa with massage rooms. The house was intended to function as a resort for a single family. Exterior walls would be clad in Pavonazzo marble, veneer, a white and gold stone quarried in Italy. The roof would use terracotta tiles. The bronze entrance doors, custom forged, would stand 18 feet tall and weigh several tons. The doors alone would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. The windows and door frames throughout the house would be constructed from Brazilian mahogany. This decision carried both aesthetic and financial weight. In 2001, the Brazilian government had banned the export of big-leaf mahogany to protect remaining forests. Westgate's architects sourced wood from the last legal harvests before the ban took effect. The material cost $4 million. The wood was rare, dense, resistant to rot and insects. It was also increasingly impossible to obtain legally. The house would contain some of the final examples of Brazilian mahogany used in American residential construction. The ballroom ceiling would feature a hand-painted dome. An artist would spend years on the work, applying paint and gold leaf in intricate patterns, designed to evoke the ceiling frescoes of European palaces. The dome alone would cost more than $500,000. The estimated construction cost was $100 million. Some later estimates ranged higher, but $100 million was the figure David Siegel cited publicly. The timeline was optimistic, 2 to 3 years to completion. Aggressive but achievable if construction proceeded without major delays. The plans called for imported marble, 24-karat gold leaf, custom bronze, and last harvest mahogany. Beautiful, yes. But David Siegel had built his empire by understanding what people could afford in small increments, monthly payments, financing over years. The house he was planning didn't operate on increments. It operated on a scale that defied the model that had made him wealthy. The project required a manufactured hill. The 10-acre plot was relatively flat. Louis XIV had reshaped the terrain around Versailles, creating lakes and elevations that didn't exist naturally. David Siegel would do the same. Construction crews would build an artificial hill, raising the foundation so the house would sit elevated above the surrounding landscape. Visible, prominent, a palace rising from Florida scrubland. The plans were finalized, permits secured, contractors hired. The estimated cost was $100 million. The timeline was 2 to 3 years. Construction began in late 2004, October 2004, Windermere. Heavy equipment carved into the 10-acre plot. The first task was building the hill, an artificial elevation to match David's vision of a palace rising above the landscape, just as Louis XIV had reshaped the terrain around Versailles. Earth movers hauled dirt, grading crews sculpted slopes. What had been flat lakefront became a manufactured prominence. The foundation came next. Concrete poured in sections over weeks. Steel reinforcement installed in grids designed to support weight distributed unevenly across 90,000 square feet. The engineering wasn't complex in theory. Large buildings were built routinely, but the scale introduced complications. Load calculations, settling predictions, drainage systems to prevent water accumulation under a structure covering more than 2 acres. By early 2005, the steel frame was rising. Vertical columns, horizontal beams, the skeleton of the house taking shape against the Florida sky. Welders worked in shifts. The frame grew week by week, floor by floor. What had been architectural drawings became three-dimensional space. Rooms that existed only on paper became volumes defined by steel. The materials arrived in shipments. Marble from Italy, mahogany from Brazil. The $4 million wood purchase, carefully transported, stored under cover to prevent weather damage before installation. Bronze components for the entrance doors, forged to specification, shipped in sections. Terracotta roof tiles, thousands of them, staged in pallets. The site became a logistics operation. Deliveries scheduled, materials inventoried, staging areas organized to keep supplies accessible but not obstructing active work zones. The exterior walls went up slowly. Each section required precision. The Pavonazzo marble veneer wasn't structural. The concrete and steel behind it bore the weight, but the facing needed to align perfectly. Gaps or misalignments would be visible. Crews worked from scaffolding, setting each piece, checking level, sealing joints. The process moved at the speed of craft, not the speed of assembly line construction. Inside, the complexity multiplied. 11 kitchens meant 11 sets of plumbing, 11 electrical systems, 11 ventilation requirements. The 2-story movie theater required acoustic design, soundproofing between the theater and adjacent rooms, speaker placement, projection booth construction. The ice skating rink required refrigeration systems embedded in the floor. The bowling alley required precise leveling across its length. Regulations specified tolerances of fractions of an inch. The House wasn't just large, it was technically intricate. Each amenity introduced specialized requirements. The 20,000-bottle wine cellar needed climate control, temperature and humidity maintained within narrow ranges. The aquarium for exotic fish required filtration, oxygenation, heating. The indoor pool required drainage, chemical systems, ventilation to prevent moisture damage to surrounding areas. As construction progressed, the plans evolved. Jackie wanted adjustments. Rooms intended as playrooms became yoga studios as the children aged. A second movie theater was added, one for family use, one for guests. The basement expanded to include a teenager's lounge, gaming areas, storage for sports equipment. David reportedly told contractors to build for 500-year durability. Materials should outlast generations. Decisions favored permanence over cost savings. The ballroom ceiling dome became a project within the project. An artist was hired to hand-paint the design. Gold leaf, intricate patterns, colors that would evoke European palace interiors. The work couldn't be rushed. The artist worked on-site over months, applying paint in layers, adding gold leaf in careful sections. The dome alone would cost more than $500,000. It was art commissioned for a private residence, unlikely ever to be seen by more than a few hundred people at gatherings. The 24-karat gold leaf arrived in sheets, thin, delicate, requiring skilled application. Craftsmen from Europe were brought to the site to apply it. The material was expensive. The labor was expensive. But the result was what the Siegels wanted: ceilings that reflected light, surfaces that announced wealth without ambiguity. The timeline slipped almost immediately. The original target of 2006 or 2007 for completion became implausible by late 2005. Construction was moving forward, but the complexity of coordinating so many specialized trades – electricians, plumbers, HVAC specialists, marble workers, carpenters, painters, metalworkers – meant delays accumulated. A holdup in one area cascaded to others. The movie theater couldn't be finished until the HVAC was complete. The HVAC couldn't be finalized until walls were fully insulated. Insulation required completed framing. Everything connected. Workers rotated through the site in shifts. Peak employment reached several hundred people on site simultaneously. Concrete crews, steel workers, carpenters, electricians, plumbers, masons laying tile and stone, painters, landscapers preparing the grounds. The project employed more people than many commercial construction sites. Management required coordination across dozens of subcontractors, each responsible for a piece of the whole. David Siegel visited regularly. He walked through the framed structure, inspecting progress, asking questions, making decisions about finishes and details. He was 70, then 71, then 72 as construction continued. Westgate Resorts continued expanding. The Las Vegas PH Towers project was underway. His business required constant attention, but the house was personal. It was the monument. By 2007, the house was roughly 30% complete. The steel frame stood. The exterior walls were rising. The roof was being staged. Marble was being installed in sections, but vast areas remained unfinished. Rooms were framed but not fitted. Electrical wiring ran through walls, but fixtures weren't installed. Plumbing was stubbed in, but bathrooms weren't tiled. The pool basins were formed but not lined. The costs were escalating beyond the original $100 million estimate. Change orders, material price increases, labor costs higher than projected. The specialized nature of the work meant premium pricing for skilled craftsmen. David Siegel was wealthy enough to absorb the overruns. Westgate was generating close to $1 billion annually. Cash flow was strong. The house was expensive, but not prohibitively so. Then the credit markets froze. While the plans showcased ballrooms and bowling alleys, the real story was happening in construction trailers and on job sites operating in Florida heat. Behind the vision of French grandeur ran an American machinery of labor. The construction crews worked 6-day weeks during push phases. 10-hour days standard, longer when deadlines approached. Florida in summer meant temperatures above 90 degrees with humidity that made the air feel liquid. Exterior work, setting marble, welding steel, laying roof tiles, happened under direct sun. Breaks were scheduled for hydration. heat exhaustion was a constant risk. The workforce changed constantly. Concrete crews finished their work and moved to other projects. Framers completed the steel skeleton and departed. Electricians arrived, ran wiring, left. Plumbers installed rough-in lines, then returned months later for fixtures. HVAC specialists worked in sections, ductwork first, then units, then final connections. The coordination required advanced planning. Materials needed to arrive when crews were ready. Delays in one trade backed up others. Specialized craftsmen were brought in for work that required particular expertise. European artisans applied the gold leaf to ceiling domes, a skill requiring years of training, steady hands, patience. The 24-karat gold arrived in sheets thinner than paper. Each sheet was applied to prepared surfaces using adhesive, then burnished to eliminate bubbles and wrinkles. The work was slow. Mistakes were expensive. The craftsmen worked on elevated scaffolding, reaching overhead for hours, applying gold to surfaces that would eventually catch and reflect light from chandeliers below. Marble workers installed the pavonazzo veneer on exterior walls and interior floors. The stone arrived in slabs, each weighing hundreds of pounds. Crews used lifts and rigging to position pieces. The stone had to be cut precisely to fit. Any gap or misalignment would be visible in the final product. Cutting marble generated dust. Protective equipment was required. The work was physical, technical, and unforgiving of error. The house required more than construction labor. It required maintenance labor, a parallel operation that would continue long after the house was finished. Cleaning 90,000 square feet, maintaining 3 swimming pools, servicing 11 kitchens, managing grounds across 10 acres, operating the mechanical systems that would keep the house climate-controlled, the ice rink frozen, the aquarium functioning. The house wasn't just being built, it was being designed to require permanent staffing. David and Jackie lived in their 26,000 square foot house with 19 staff members, housekeepers who cleaned rooms daily, nannies who cared for the children, a driver who managed transportation, groundskeepers who maintained the lawn and landscaping. The new house would require even more. Estimates suggested 25 or 30 staff members for full operation. Cleaners, maintenance workers, chefs for the commercial kitchen during events, security personnel, property managers. The gap between the Siegels' experience of the house and the workers' experience was absolute. David visited in air-conditioned comfort, walking through climate-controlled spaces, discussing finishes and timelines with contractors. Workers arrived at dawn, worked in heat, climbed scaffolding, hauled materials. The house to David was a vision becoming real. To workers, it was hourly wages, overtime when available, and the physical cost of transforming raw materials into luxury. The math was stark. Hundreds of workers, thousands of hours of labor, years of collective effort, all directed toward building a residence for one family. The bowling alley, used recreationally a few times per month, required the same construction effort as a commercial bowling alley serving hundreds of customers weekly. The ice rink, a novelty for private use, required installation and maintenance labor comparable to a public rink. The house consumed labor at a scale that residential construction rarely demands. The irony was structural. David Siegel had built Westgate by understanding what middle-class families could afford through financing. Small monthly payments over years. Accessible luxury in fractional doses. The house operated on the opposite principle. Total ownership, all at once, no fractions. The workers building it earned hourly wages. Many were the same demographic Westgate targeted. Families financing purchases, managing budgets carefully, measuring expenditures. They were building a monument to wealth they would never accumulate themselves. Yet construction continued. Jobs were jobs. The work paid. The project was large enough that it provided steady employment for years, unusual in construction, where projects typically last months, not multiple years. For some workers, the Versailles house became a reliable income source. Long-term employment, stability. The house was being built on 2 foundations. One was concrete and steel, engineered to support 90,000 square feet. The other was human labor, the time and physical effort of people whose names would never appear in articles about the mansion, whose contribution would be invisible in the final product. The marble they set would be admired. The gold they applied would be photographed, but the workers themselves would disappear from the story. By 2008, both foundations were about to be tested. September 2008. Lehman Brothers collapsed. Credit markets froze. Within weeks, the foundation of David Siegel's empire, access to cheap money, evaporated. The timeshare business depended on consumer financing. A family buying a week at a Westgate resort didn't pay $15,000 cash. They financed it over 10 years at interest. Westgate provided the loan. The model worked when credit was easy. Banks lent money to Westgate. Westgate lent money to customers. The cycle reinforced itself. Revenue came from selling timeshare weeks, collecting interest on loans, and charging management fees. As long as credit flowed, the business expanded. The 2008 financial crisis cut the flow. Banks stopped lending. Not gradually, abruptly. Institutions that had provided Westgate with credit lines to finance operations suddenly demanded immediate repayment. New loans became unavailable. The company that had operated on leveraged growth found itself squeezed. Westgate still owned 28 resorts, still employed more than 10,000 people, still had inventory to sell. But without access to credit, sales collapsed. Customers who might have financed a timeshare purchase a year earlier couldn't qualify for loans. Banks tightened lending standards. Unemployment rose. Families stopped taking vacations, let alone buying vacation properties. Westgate's sales revenue, the engine of the entire operation, plummeted. The company had been generating close to $1 billion annually. By late 2008, revenues were falling month over month. The decline was steep, fast. The kind of drop that turns profitable companies insolvent in quarters, not years. David Siegel faced a problem with two components. First, Westgate needed to service existing debt, money borrowed to finance earlier expansion. Banks were calling those loans. Second, the company had committed to the PH Towers Westgate project in Las Vegas, a 52-story high-rise under construction. The tower was consuming capital. Construction loans were coming due. The project was too far along to abandon, but completing it required money Westgate no longer had reliable access to. The squeeze tightened through late 2008 and into 2009. Westgate laid off employees. Not dozens, thousands. By some reports, more than 3,300 jobs were eliminated. Sales teams reduced, resort staff trimmed, corporate positions cut. The layoffs were brutal in scale and speed. The company that had been one of Central Florida's largest employers shrank dramatically. The PH Towers became an albatross. The Las Vegas real estate market was collapsing simultaneously with the national crisis. Tourism to Vegas dropped, hotel occupancy rates fell. The market for timeshare units in a 52-story tower evaporated. Construction continued because stopping would have meant losing the property entirely to creditors, but the project was bleeding cash. Banks demanded payments. David Siegel fought to retain ownership. Eventually, he lost. The PH Towers were sold to satisfy debt. The tower he had envisioned as a crown jewel of Westgate's portfolio passed to other hands. The personal impact followed the business crisis. The Siegels reduced household staff from 19 to 4 or 5. Housekeepers let go. Nannies released. The 26,000-square-foot house that had operated like a small hotel now functioned with minimal staffing. Jackie, who had never cleaned her own house, started cleaning. She shopped at Walmart instead of boutiques. The shift wasn't from wealth to poverty. The family remained extraordinarily well off by any measure, but the psychological adjustment was real. The lifestyle contracted. Private jets were grounded. The family flew commercial. Jackie described the experience later as disorienting, learning how rental car counters worked, navigating airports like regular travelers. These were skills she hadn't needed for years, and construction on Versailles stopped. The house in Windermere was roughly 60% complete. The steel frame stood, exterior walls were up, the roof was installed, but vast sections remained unfinished. Rooms were framed but not finished. Electrical and plumbing were roughed in but not completed. The marble work was partially done. The gold leaf ceilings were incomplete. The house was a shell, recognizable as a structure but not habitable. David Siegel made the decision to halt construction in 2009. Westgate was fighting for survival. The company needed every available dollar to service debt and avoid bankruptcy. The house, a personal project, Consuming millions became indefensible. Work stopped, crews left, the site went quiet. The property was listed for sale. The asking price started at $100 million, the estimated cost to build, though the house wasn't finished. Later the price dropped to $75 million, then $65 million. No buyers appeared. The market for a 90,000 square foot unfinished mansion in the middle of the worst financial crisis in decades was non-existent. The house sat on the market for months, then years, accumulating no offers. The structure that was supposed to announce permanence had become a monument to vulnerability. The timeshare king, who had built a fortune selling Americans' dreams they could finance, couldn't finish his own house. The man who had sold thousands of families the fantasy of ownership through monthly payments now faced banks demanding immediate payment on his debts. The irony wasn't subtle. David Siegel had spent decades explaining to customers that timeshares were smart investments, affordable luxury through financing. Now he was trapped by the same mechanism. Borrowed money worked when times were good. When times collapsed, debt became a weight impossible to carry. In interviews during this period, David described the experience as going from riches to rags. He later clarified the statement, not literal rags, but a psychological shift. The sense of invulnerability that comes with wealth had evaporated. Reporters asked if he regretted the house. He didn't answer directly. The question wasn't regret. The question was survival. Westgate survived. Barely. The company cut costs aggressively, laid off more staff, sold properties, fought with banks over debt restructuring. David Siegel, who had built the company from 16 units to an empire, now fought to keep it from disintegrating entirely. The focus shifted from growth to preservation. The house in Windermere, the monument to success, became a reminder of what happens when assumptions about infinite growth prove wrong. The house remained frozen through 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012. A concrete skeleton in a gated community. Windows installed but not fully sealed. Doors fitted but not finished. The largest single-family home in America. Incomplete. Waiting. January 2012. The Queen of Versailles premiered at the Sundance Film Festival. Director Lauren Greenfield had spent nearly 3 years filming the Siegels, first capturing their wealth, then documenting its unraveling. Greenfield had approached the family in 2007 before the crisis hit. Her initial concept was straightforward: document the construction of the largest house in America. The access was remarkable. The Siegels allowed cameras into their 26,000 square foot home, onto the construction site, into family moments. David agreed to be filmed at work. Jackie allowed crews to follow her shopping trips, beauty pageant events, interactions with the children. Then the financial crisis arrived. The documentary that was supposed to showcase the construction of a palace became something different, a chronicle of collapse. Greenfield kept filming. The Siegels, to their credit or detriment, continued allowing access. The cameras captured the layoffs at Westgate, the household staff reductions, Jackie shopping at Walmart, confused by the experience, David worrying about losing the PH towers, the construction site going silent. The film showed the family at their peak and in their descent. Jackie trying on $17,000 boots, the children playing in rooms larger than most apartments, the nannies caring for the kids while Jackie attended pageant events. Then the shift, commercial flights replacing private jets, Jackie cutting coupons, the family moving through their enormous house with skeleton staff. The documentary premiered to critical attention. Greenfield won the directing award at Sundance. Critics praised the film's portrait of American excess confronting economic reality. The Queen of Versailles became one of the most discussed documentaries of 2012. Audiences divided. Some viewed the Siegels with schadenfreude, billionaires brought low by their own overreach. Others found them sympathetic, a family struggling with genuine fear about losing everything they'd built. The film allowed both readings. It showed conspicuous consumption but also human vulnerability. Jackie wasn't portrayed as villainous. She was portrayed as someone born into modest circumstances who married into wealth and didn't know how to function when that wealth contracted. David Siegel hated the film. He filed a defamation lawsuit against Greenfield, her production company, and the Sundance Institute in 2012. The complaint alleged that the documentary misrepresented Westgate's financial condition, staged scenes to make the family appear worse off than they were, and damaged the company's reputation. David claimed the film implied Westgate was bankrupt when it was merely struggling. He argued that scenes were manipulated, that Jackie didn't genuinely not understand how rental cars worked, that moments were scripted or exaggerated for dramatic effect. The lawsuit requested that a disclaimer be added to the film stating that Westgate had recovered financially. David wanted the public to know the company wasn't failing. The lawsuit also sought damages exceeding $75,000. Greenfield and her legal team responded that everything in the film was factual. No scenes were staged. No dialogue was scripted. The Siegels had signed releases allowing the filming. The footage was authentic documentation of real events during a specific period. If the family regretted allowing that access, the regret didn't constitute defamation. The case was stayed in 2013 and sent to arbitration. Legal battles over documentaries often turn on definitions of truth and editorial choices. Did the film present facts accurately, or did editing create false impressions? The arbitrator reviewed the footage, the context, the releases signed by the Siegels. In 2014, the arbitrator ruled in favor of the filmmakers. The decision found no false content in the documentary, no demonstrated harm that met the legal standard for defamation, no actual malice, the requirement for a defamation claim involving a public figure. The arbitrator ordered Westgate to pay the filmmakers $750,000 in legal fees and damages. David Siegel lost the legal battle. The film remained unchanged. No disclaimer was added. The lasting effect wasn't legal, it was cultural. The Queen of Versailles became the defining document of the Siegel story. Long after the financial crisis ended, long after Westgate recovered, the film remained. It had been seen by hundreds of thousands of people in theaters and millions more through streaming services. The Siegels were now permanently associated with excess, collapse, and the house in Windermere. Whatever David and Jackie thought of their portrayal, Lauren Greenfield had achieved something they hadn't: permanence. The film would exist indefinitely. It couldn't be demolished or renovated. It was a fixed record. The Siegels had wanted to build for 500 years. Greenfield had captured them for as long as the film survived. The house in Windermere remained unfinished. The documentary ended with uncertainty. Construction halted, the future unclear. David fighting to save his business, Jackie adjusting to reduced circumstances. The mansion sitting empty on 10 acres, 60% complete, waiting for someone to decide whether it would ever be finished. But the film's conclusion wasn't the story's end. Westgate began to stabilize. By 2013, the company had restructured its debt, cut costs, and found new revenue streams. The timeshare market hadn't recovered fully, but Westgate was profitable again. Margins were tighter, operations leaner, but the company survived. David Siegel, 78 years old by 2013, hadn't retired. He was still CEO, still fighting, and quietly, discussions began about resuming construction on the house. June 6, 2015, David and Jackie Siegel's 18-year-old daughter, Victoria, was found unresponsive in the family's Windermere home. She died the following day. The cause? Accidental overdose of methadone and sertraline. Victoria was the oldest daughter. Friends called her Ricky. She had graduated from high school weeks earlier. She was described by family as artistic, free-spirited, someone who preferred making tie-dye shirts to wearing designer clothes. She loved to sketch. She kept journals. The family had no indication of the severity of her struggle. Victoria had undergone voluntary rehabilitation earlier in 2015 for dependence on prescription medications used to control seizures. She had returned home. To her parents, she appeared to be managing, sober, stable, planning for the future. She wasn't. After Victoria's death, Jackie received a text message from one of Victoria's friends. The message directed her to look in Victoria's bedroom nightstand. There was a diary. Victoria had left instructions with the friend. If something happened, tell my mother where the diary is, and suggest they publish it. Jackie found the diary. Multiple journals, actually. Years of entries. Victoria had documented everything. The drug use that began in her early teens. Experimentation with Adderall, cocaine, Xanax, opioids. The depression. the feelings of inadequacy, the sense that she was never good enough, never pretty enough, never worthy of the life she'd been given. She wrote about taking pills to feel normal, then taking other pills to come down. She chronicled a cycle of use, shame, renewed use. Her parents had seen none of it. Victoria had hidden the struggle completely. In front of them, she performed sobriety. Behind closed doors, she documented dissent. The disparity between the two realities was absolute. Jackie and David had believed their daughter was healthy. The diary revealed someone who had been drowning for years. The autopsy concluded accidental overdose. Methadone, a prescription painkiller often used to treat opioid addiction. Sertraline, sold commercially as Zoloft, prescribed for depression. The concentrations of both drugs in her system were significant. Victoria had been trying to manage her pain. She miscalculated the dose, or the interaction between medications proved fatal. The medical examiner ruled it unintentional. She hadn't been trying to die. She'd been trying to feel better. David Siegel was 80 years old when his daughter died. He had built an empire. He was building a palace, but he couldn't save Victoria. In interviews after her death, he said, "I thought drug addicts lived under bridges. I had no idea that the more affluent the family, the more chance you have of having a drug user." The statement revealed the gap in his understanding. Addiction wasn't something that happened to other people's children. It had happened in his house, in rooms filled with wealth and privilege, under the care of parents who loved their daughter but didn't see the signs. Victoria had access to everything money could provide: education, healthcare, comfort. None of it protected her. Jackie struggled with the decision about the diary. Publishing it meant exposing Victoria's private suffering, making public what Victoria had kept hidden from everyone except the pages. But Victoria had asked for it. The text to her friend had been explicit. She wanted the diary shared. She believed it could help other teenagers who were struggling the same way she had struggled. The Siegels decided to honor Victoria's request. They published the diary as a book. Victoria's Voice, Our Daughter's Losing Battle with Drug Abuse. The journals were reproduced in Victoria's handwriting. Her artwork included her words, teen slang, raw emotion, unfiltered descriptions of drug use, presented without editing for language or content. The book was difficult to read. It was supposed to be. David and Jackie founded the Victoria's Voice Foundation in 2015. The mission: drug education, addiction prevention, naloxone distribution. Naloxone is an opioid overdose reversal medication. Administered quickly, usually as a nasal spray, it can save someone who is overdosing. The Siegels began lobbying for wider naloxone access. They pushed for police departments and first responders to carry it. They advocated for legislation allowing family members to obtain naloxone without a prescription. The foundation distributed naloxone kits to law enforcement agencies across Florida. Within the first few years, the medication was reportedly used to reverse more than 700 overdoses in Seminole County alone. Each reversal was a life saved. Someone who would have died didn't. The numbers accumulated. Hundreds, then thousands. David Siegel redirected the final decade of his life. Westgate continued operating. He remained CEO, but his focus shifted. He lobbied Congress for the Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act, which passed in 2016. He supported Florida legislation, House Bill 477 in 2017, that allowed prosecutors to charge drug dealers with murder if their product resulted in an overdose death. He spoke at events. He met with lawmakers. He told Victoria's story repeatedly, publicly, to audiences who might otherwise not understand that addiction didn't discriminate by income. The work didn't erase the loss. Victoria was gone. But David Siegel, who had spent his career selling vacation fantasies, spent his final years trying to prevent other families from experiencing what his family had experienced. The man who had built an empire by understanding what people wanted now worked to save them from what they didn't know they needed protection from. The house in Windermere remained unfinished. It was no longer just a monument to wealth. It was the house where a daughter had died, the palace that couldn't protect its princess, the structure designed for permanence, haunted by absence. Construction would eventually resume, but the meaning had changed. Construction resumed. By then, 12 years had passed since ground was broken. The house was 60% complete. The remaining 40% would take nearly another decade. The crews that returned to the site weren't the same workers who had left in 2009. Years had passed. Some had moved to other cities, others had retired. New contractors were hired, new subcontractors brought in. The continuity that typically exists in construction, workers who understand the project's history, the design decisions, the locations of systems already installed, had been broken. The new teams worked from plans and from what they could see in the partially completed structure. Progress was slow. The house had sat unfinished for 7 years. Exposure to weather had caused damage. Seals around windows had degraded. Water infiltration had occurred in areas where roofing wasn't fully completed. Some electrical work needed to be redone. Inspection protocols had changed. Code requirements had been updated. Work completed before 2009 needed to be verified against current standards. The costs continued. Not just construction costs, carrying costs, property taxes on an unfinished mansion, insurance on a structure worth tens of millions but generating no income, security to prevent vandalism or theft, maintenance to prevent further weather damage. The house consumed money even when construction wasn't active. David Siegel was in his 80s, still working, still CEO of Westgate. The company had recovered from the 2008 crisis, not to the explosive growth of the mid-2000s, but to stability. Westgate operated profitably. The timeshare market had contracted permanently. Fewer Americans were buying vacation ownership after the crisis, but Westgate had survived where competitors had failed. The company was leaner, more cautious, but operational. David visited the construction site less frequently. Age and focus on Victoria's Voice Foundation meant less time for the house, but the project continued. Jackie oversaw much of the work. She made decisions about finishes, fixtures, room configurations. The house had become as much her project as his. The timeline remained uncertain. Contractors estimated completion dates, then revised them. 2018 became 2019 became 2020. Each year brought progress but also revealed new complications. The two-story movie theater required acoustic work more complex than originally planned. The ice skating rink's refrigeration system needed redesign. The wine cellar's climate control failed inspection and required reinstallation. Then the pandemic arrived. 2020 and 2021 brought new delays. Supply chains disrupted, material prices spiked. Availability of specialized craftsmen became sporadic. Lumber costs tripled. Copper prices surged. The house, which had already consumed more than the original $100 million budget, became even more expensive to finish. Global disruptions in manufacturing meant custom items, light fixtures, hardware, specialty glass, took months longer to arrive than scheduled. Construction slowed but didn't stop entirely. Work continued where materials were available, rooms finished in sections. The ballroom ceiling dome, started years earlier, was completed. Gold leaf applied. The final result was as intended, a hand-painted masterpiece that had taken an artist years to execute. The chandeliers were installed. Crystal imported from Europe, each fixture weighing hundreds of pounds, hung from reinforced mounts in the ceiling. Marble work progressed, bathrooms tiled, floors laid. The 30 bathrooms took months to complete. Each required custom fixtures, tile work, ventilation, plumbing connections. The 11 kitchens moved toward completion. Not simultaneously, one at a time, as crews finished each space and moved to the next. September 2022, Hurricane Ian hit Florida. A Category 4 storm with sustained winds exceeding 150 miles per hour. The storm made landfall south of Windermere but brought heavy rain and wind to the central Florida region. The Versailles house, still under construction, took damage. Water flooded partially completed rooms. Sections of roof that weren't fully sealed allowed rain penetration. The 24-karat gold molding, applied by hand over years, was damaged in areas where water infiltrated. Ceilings that had been finished required repair. Rooms that had been nearly complete needed remediation. Equipment was damaged. Scaffolding collapsed. Debris littered the site. Jackie Siegel told reporters the storm caused more than $10 million in damage. Areas she and David had worked years to finish were now compromised. The devastation wasn't just financial, it was emotional. The house that was supposed to last 500 years couldn't withstand one storm. Repairs began immediately. Insurance covered some costs. The Siegels paid the rest. The damage pushed the timeline back again. Rooms were dried out. Mold. Remediation performed where water had sat. Gold leaf was reapplied in damaged sections. The work that had been done twice before, framing, finishing, was done a third time in storm-affected areas. By 2024, the house was approaching completion. Elevators functioned. Ceilings were installed. Chandeliers hung. Windows were sealed. The bowling alley was operational. The ice rink worked. The pools were lined and ready for water, but rooms remained unfurnished. Tarp still covered some floors to protect finishes during ongoing work. Scaffolding stood in sections where final details were being addressed. David Siegel was 89 years old. He had been building this house for 2 decades. 20 years from groundbreaking to near completion. Longer than many people's careers. Longer than some people's lives. The house had consumed years he couldn't buy back. Money that had compounded into amounts beyond the original budget, and focus that could have gone elsewhere. He would not live to see it. Finished. April 5, 2025. David Siegel died. He had been fighting cancer. The man who founded Westgate Resorts. The timeshare king. The father who lost a daughter and spent his final decade trying to save other families from the same loss. He died without ever sleeping in the house he'd spent 21 years building. The house in Windermere stood at roughly 90 to 95% complete, close, but not finished. The largest single-family home in America remained a work in progress. Jackie Siegel announced that construction would continue. The house would be completed, and it would open to the public on June 6, 2025, exactly 10 years after Victoria's death. June 6, 2025. If Jackie Siegel's timeline holds, the house will open its doors for the first time, not to the family who built it, but to donors attending a Victoria's Voice Foundation fundraiser. The date is deliberate. 10 years to the day after Victoria's death. National Naloxone Awareness Day, designated by Congress in 2023. The house, that David designed as a private palace, will host a public event raising money for addiction prevention. The ballroom that was meant for family celebrations will welcome donors supporting a cause David discovered only after losing his daughter. The transformation is complete, even if the construction isn't. The house David envisioned as a monument to success has become something else, a memorial to loss, a venue for service, a space whose meaning shifted entirely between conception and completion. Jackie, now 58, has spent the months since David's death overseeing final work. Rooms are being furnished. The commercial kitchen is being equipped for catering. Sound systems installed for speeches. Parking arrangements planned for the 35-car garage and overflow areas. The house that was designed to host parties for friends will host its first event for strangers united by grief and purpose. What will be shown remains partially undefined. The ballroom, certainly. The main rooms that demonstrate the scale. Perhaps sections of the house that reveal the craftsmanship. The hand-painted ceiling dome, the Brazilian mahogany, the gold leaf. The event isn't a house tour. It's a fundraiser that happens to occur inside the largest single-family home in America. The irony is structural. David wanted privacy. The house was designed to be separate from the world. Gated community, security, 10 acres of buffer between the family and everyone else. Now that separation will be breached, not by accident, but by intention. Jackie is opening the house because it serves Victoria's legacy. The palace modeled on Versailles, symbol of absolute monarchy and private excess, will become a platform for public advocacy. The costs will continue. Operating a 90,000 square foot house requires permanent staffing, climate control for that much space, pool maintenance, groundskeeping across 10 acres, security. The house consumes resources simply by existing. Whether it functions primarily as a residence or evolves into something else, event venue, foundation headquarters, hybrid space, it will require constant expenditure to maintain. The question of who will live there remains partially answered. Jackie and some of the younger children, presumably, but 14 bedrooms for a reduced household, 30 bathrooms, 11 kitchens, 3 pools. The house was designed for a large family with frequent guests. Several of David's older children are adults now, living elsewhere. The family that might have filled the house in 2007 no longer exists in that configuration. The house has outlasted the family structure it was built for. David had wanted the house to last 500 years. He told contractors to build for permanence, materials that wouldn't decay, systems that could be maintained indefinitely. But permanence requires ongoing commitment. Buildings don't maintain themselves. The house will last as long as someone decides it should last, as long as resources flow toward its preservation rather than allowing it to decay. The Palace of Versailles in France survived because it became public property. The nation decided it mattered. It was preserved not for one family, but for history. David Siegel's Versailles remains private property. Its future depends on private decisions. Jackie can maintain it. She can sell it. She can convert it to commercial use. She can leave it to heirs who will face the same question. What do you do with 90,000 square feet you can't use fully and can't easily convert to another purpose? The June 6th event will be the first test of the house's public function. How many donors attend? How the space works for large gatherings? Whether the ballroom designed for 500 to 1,000 guests can actually accommodate that number comfortably? Whether parking is sufficient? Whether the logistics of moving hundreds of people through a house this large can be managed without chaos? If the event succeeds, it establishes a model. The house that couldn't be sold, couldn't be finished in David's lifetime, and couldn't protect the family from tragedy might find purpose as a venue for the foundation David and Jackie created in response to tragedy. The monument to wealth becomes a tool for service. If the event fails, or if Jackie decides private use is preferable, the house returns to what it was originally intended to be: a residence, too large for the family that remains, too expensive to maintain for residential use alone. But private, controlled, separated from the world, David spent his life competing in and eventually dominating. The house David Siegel designed for privacy will open, briefly, to the public. What happens after June 6, 2025 remains to be determined. The largest single-family home in America, built over 21 years, completed after its founder's death, will begin its next chapter, whatever that chapter becomes. The Palace of Versailles in France took 100 years to complete. Louis XIV moved in when it was unfinished. His successors continued building. Eventually, revolution came. The palace survived because it became public property, a monument to history, not to one family. David Siegel's Versailles took 21 years and remains unfinished. He never moved in. His successor, his widow, continues the work. The house may yet be completed, but it has already become something its builder never intended: a memorial, not a monument. Perhaps the timeshare model was always the more honest approach. Sell people 1 week at a time. Promise partial ownership, not complete control. Acknowledge that nothing is permanent, that wealth is temporary, that we're all just renting time in spaces that will outlast us. David Siegel built an empire by understanding what people could afford in increments. The house in Windermere was what he couldn't afford, not financially, but temporally. You cannot buy enough time to finish everything you start. Buildings outlast people. This is not sentiment, it's mathematics. David Siegel was born in 1935. He died in 2025. 90 years. The house, if maintained, could stand for centuries. The materials were chosen for permanence. Brazilian mahogany doesn't rot, marble doesn't decay, bronze doesn't corrode easily. The structure was engineered to last longer than the man who commissioned it. That calculation was correct. The house remains. David doesn't. The gap between aspiration and completion defined the project from the beginning. The house was supposed to be finished in 2007. It wasn't done in 2010 or 2015 or 2020. By the time construction approached completion, the original vision had been altered by events no blueprint anticipated. Financial collapse, a daughter's death, hurricane damage, a pandemic. The house absorbed all of it and continued existing, incomplete but enduring. Wealth proved temporary. David Siegel's fortune fluctuated. Near $1 billion in 2007, severely contracted by 2009, recovered partially by the 2000s. The house's value fluctuated. With it, listed for $100 million, reduced to $65 million, taken off the market. The number assigned to the property changed depending on market conditions, desperation, optimism. But the structure itself, the physical assembly of materials occupying space, remained constant. Wealth is an abstraction. The house is concrete. What survives isn't always what was intended. David wanted a palace that would announce his success for 500 years. What survives instead is a house associated with financial collapse, personal tragedy, and a documentary film that portrayed him struggling. The Queen of Versailles is the permanent record. More people have seen the film than will ever see the finished house. The image of David and Jackie during crisis, not during triumph, is what endured in public memory. The house that was supposed to be private became public through the documentary, through media coverage, through the decision to host a fundraiser. The separation David wanted, gates, security, distance from the world, collapsed. Not through failure of security systems, but through narrative. The story escaped the gates. The house became a symbol used in discussions about wealth inequality, American excess, the 2008 crisis. It became shorthand. The house intended as private monument became public metaphor. Cost and beauty proved inseparable, as they always are. The hand-painted ceiling dome cost more than $500,000. The Brazilian mahogany cost $4 million. The 24-karat gold leaf applied by hand in thin sheets. Every beautiful element carried a price that could be calculated precisely. The beauty wasn't free. It was purchased with money that could have been spent elsewhere, on other things, for other purposes, toward other ends. The choice to spend it on gold leaf and marble was exactly that, a choice. Beauty doesn't happen accidentally. Someone pays for it. The invisible labor that built the house will remain invisible. Hundreds of workers over 21 years. Thousands of hours of collective effort. Names that won't appear on plaques. Contributions that won't be remembered except as the structure itself. The workers moved on to other projects. Some retired, some died. The house remains as evidence of their labor, but the labor itself, the physical effort, the skill, the time, is gone. Only the result persists. The house stands in Windermere, Florida, 90,000 square feet on 10 acres. Gold leaf, marble, mahogany, bronze doors 18 feet tall, 14 bedrooms, 30 bathrooms, 3 pools, a ballroom with a hand-painted dome. It will likely be finished soon. Someone will decide what to do with 14 bedrooms and 30 bathrooms and a ballroom designed for 500 guests. But finished doesn't mean complete. And completed doesn't mean what was intended. How much space does one family need? How much house can a fortune buy before the house starts buying you? And when the builder dies before the project finishes, who decides what it means? These are questions Versailles asks. It doesn't answer them. What do you think? Was David Siegel's Versailles an expression of the American dream or evidence of its limits? Can you actually build your way to permanence, or is the attempt itself the point? Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious how you read this story. If you want more stories like this, where wealth meets mortality and ambition confronts consequence, consider subscribing. These investigations take time, and your support makes them possible. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.